The school assembly hall had been transformed overnight into something resembling a galactic courtroom. Holographic projectors lined the walls, displaying the images of Union counselors from across known space. Physical delegates sat in rows of chairs brought in for the occasion, their various anatomies accommodated by hastily arranged seating modifications, and at the front of the hall, facing this extraordinary audience, sat 23 children from Teacher M's class. Jiwoo had insisted on wearing her best dress. The yellow one with flowers embroidered along the hem. Tawan had actually combed his hair for once, though it was already starting to rebel against the neat arrangement. The other students fidgeted and whispered and occasionally waved at their parents, who watched nervously from the back of the hall. Counselor Drendok's massive holographic form dominated the front of the room. This tribunal has been convened to reach a final determination regarding the treatment of human children. His voice echoed through the space. We have heard testimony from adults. We have observed the facilities called schools. And now we wish to hear from the children themselves. Ambassador Yun rose from her seat. Counselors, we believe that the best way to understand human education is to let the children explain it in their own words. They have not been coached or prepared. They will simply answer honestly as children do. Cathvari leaned forward in his seat, his compound eyes fixed on the young humans with intense scrutiny. He had spent the night reviewing everything he had witnessed, replaying conversations in his mind, struggling to reconcile what he had expected to find with what he had actually observed. The truth was that he remained uncertain. And uncertainty was not a feeling he enjoyed. Who would like to speak first? Counselor Drendok asked. Tawan's hand shot up immediately, and several adults winced in anticipation. Yes, young human. Please tell us about your experience in school. Taiwan stood up, completely unintimidated by the alien dignitaries surrounding him. School is mostly boring, he announced. We have to sit in chairs all day and listen to stuff and write things down, and I get in trouble a lot because I talk too much. Cathvari nodded grimly, feeling vindicated, but Taiwan continued. Last week I learned how to multiply big numbers, and my dad could not believe I could do it faster than him. And he was so proud that he bought me ice cream. You enjoyed the reward, Cathvari observed, not the learning itself. No. I like the learning too, Taiwan said, thinking about it. Because now I know something I did not know before, and knowing stuff feels good. Like leveling up in a video game. Another child raised her hand. A quiet girl named Song Yuna, who rarely spoke in class. Sometimes I do not want to go to school, she admitted. Especially on cold mornings when my bed is warm. But then I remember that my grandmother never got to go to school because girls were not allowed to back then. And she always tells me how lucky I am to learn things she never could. Your grandmother was denied education? Mireles asked, surprised. Yes, she had to work in the fields instead. And she says she wishes she could read the letters my grandfather wrote to her before he died. But she never learned how. The hall fell silent as the weight of this simple statement sank in. Anyone else? Counselor Drendok prompted. A boy named Park Ji-hoon stood up. I want to be a doctor when I grow up. Like my uncle, and my teacher says I have to learn biology and chemistry and a lot of other hard stuff first. And sometimes I want to quit because it is too hard. But then I think about how my uncle saves people's lives, and I want to do that too. And you cannot become a doctor without school? Cathvari asked. No, you have to learn for many years. Even after regular school is over. My uncle went to school for like 20 years. 20 years of confinement to become a healer, Cathvari murmured. And for the first time, his tone held something other than accusation. Jiu raised her hand and stood without waiting to be called on. I know why we go to school, she said firmly. Teacher explained it to us yesterday. Please, tell us, Counselor Drendok encouraged. A long time ago, people did not know anything. They did not know why the sun came up, or how to make medicine, or how to build spaceships. And it took thousands and thousands of years to figure it all out. And lots of people had to think really hard and do experiments and write things down. She paused to take a breath, her small chest puffing with importance. And now all that thinking is in books. And if we learn to read and do math and understand science, we can know in a few years what took all those people thousands of years to figure out. So school is not punishment. School is like a shortcut through time. The holographic counselors exchange glances. A shortcut through time. Zhrendok repeated slowly. Towan jumped in again, unable to contain himself. Yeah. Like imagine if every kid had to figure out fire by themselves, and then figure out the wheel, and then figure out electricity. We would never get anywhere. We would just be stuck doing the same stuff over and over. Instead, we start where the last generation ended, Yuna added. And then we can go even further. Kethvari sat very still, his mandibles motionless for the first time in days. The children were describing something he had not considered. A species that must consciously transmit every scrap of knowledge to each new generation. That cannot rely on genetic memory or neural inheritance. That must painstakingly teach every single child how to be human. It was inefficient. It was slow. It was arguably cruel to the children who had to endure it. But it was also remarkable because it meant that each human generation could potentially surpass the one before. That knowledge could accumulate and compound across centuries. That a species with such short lifespans could somehow build civilizations that span stars. May I ask the children one final question? Morales said. Rising from her seat, Counselor Zhrendok nodded. Morales walked to the front of the hall and knelt down so that she was at eye level with the seated children. Do you understand now why you must go to school? Do you accept it willingly? Taiwan shrugged. I would still rather play video games. But I get why I cannot do that all the time. My mom and dad went to school, Jiwoo said. And their moms and dads went to school, and someday my kids will go to school too. Because that is how we pass things on. It is not always fun, Jihoon added. But neither is exercise, and exercise makes you strong. Maybe school is like exercise for your brain. Morales stood slowly, her feathers rippling with an emotion she could not quite name. I believe I understand now, she said, turning to face the tribunal. Humans do not imprison their children. They invest in them. They take creatures who are born knowing nothing, and they fill them with thousands of years of accumulated wisdom. And they do this because they know their time is short, and their children must be ready to continue what they started. Kethvari rose from his seat. I withdraw my accusation, he said. The words seemed to cost him great effort. I was wrong. I judged human practices by the standards of my own species, and found them cruel. But I did not understand the necessity that drives them. I did not comprehend that for humans, education is not confinement but cultivation. Counselor Zhrendok's form pulsed with warm golden light. Then this tribunal finds no evidence of wrongdoing in human educational practices. Humanity's membership candidacy is restored. And we recommend that this cultural difference be noted in the Union archives for future reference. The hall erupted in applause from the human observers, and the children looked around in happy confusion. Not entirely sure what they had accomplished, but pleased to be at the center of attention as the tribunal dissolved into celebration. Morales found herself standing beside Jiwoo. The little girl was showing her the art project she had mentioned. A crayon drawing of space with stars and planets, and now a purple bird-like figure standing among them. That is you, Jiwoo said proudly. I want to remember today forever. Morales looked at the drawing, then at the child, then at the hall full of humans young and old who had somehow bridged an impossible gap of understanding. I will remember too, she said softly, knowing that by the time Jiwoo grew old and gray, Morales would still be young by her species standards, would still carry the memory of a little girl who touched an alien's feathers and explained the purpose of school with the simple wisdom that only children possess. The Union's official report was amended that evening, under the entry for human child development. New words appeared. Humans do not imprison their young. They entrust them to knowledge keepers called teachers, who transform ignorance into understanding. The process appears tedious. The results are remarkable, it was all agreed. A fitting summary of one of the galaxy's strangest and most wonderful species. The garden behind the school was quiet, a small oasis of green where cherry trees dropped their petals onto wooden benches and stone pathways. Morales had retreated here after the classroom visits, overwhelmed by the conflicting emotions she had absorbed throughout the day. Her empathic senses were designed to detect suffering and distress. Yet the human children had radiated something far more complex than simple misery. She heard small footsteps on the path and turned to find Jiwoo approaching. With determined purpose, the little girl carried 2 juice boxes and held one out toward the alien. "You look thirsty," Jiwoo said simply. "And my mom says we should always share with guests." Morales accepted the offering, even though her physiology could not process human beverages. "Thank you, Jiwoo, that is very kind." The child sat down on the bench beside her, swinging her legs back and forth as she sipped from her own juice box. "Can I ask you something?" Jiwoo said, "Of course. Why did the bug man and you think school is bad?" "Everyone goes to school. It is normal." Morales considered how to explain the vast gulf of misunderstanding that separated human and alien perspectives. "Among my people," she began carefully, "young ones are never separated from their families. They learn by being with their flock, by watching and doing and playing. They are never put in buildings and told to sit still." Jiwoo's eyes went wide. "Never? But how do they learn math?" "We do not have math the way you do. Our knowledge passes differently." "That sounds weird," Jiwoo said with the blunt honesty of childhood. "But I guess aliens are supposed to be weird." Morales found herself almost smiling. "From my view, humans are the weird ones. Because we have schools? Because you take your children, your precious young ones, and you put them in buildings away from their parents for most of the day. And you make them sit in chairs and look at boards and learn things they do not want to learn. And you do this for years and years, and you call it love." Jiwoo was quiet for a moment, her small face serious with thought. "But if I did not go to school, I would not know how to read. Is reading so important?" "Yes," Jiwoo said firmly. "Because books have stories, and stories have adventures. And adventures teach you about the world. My teacher says the books are like doors to everywhere. And if you cannot read, then all the doors are locked." Morales felt something shift in her understanding. "Your teacher told you this?" "Teacher tells us lots of things. She says that humans figured out really hard stuff a long time ago, like how to grow food and build houses and make medicine. And if nobody wrote it down and nobody learned to read it, we would have to figure it all out again every time a baby was born. And that would take forever." The simplicity of the child's explanation struck Morales with unexpected force. "So school is where you learn what other humans already know?" "I guess so," Jiwoo shrugged. "I never thought about it like that. I just go because everyone goes." The garden gate opened, and the rest of the delegation entered. Rekathavir's mandibles were clicking with agitation. Ambassador Yun looked exhausted, and Dr. Park Minji walked beside them with quiet patience. But there was another figure among them, one that Morales had not seen before. Elder Vormouth moved slowly. His ancient body, wrapped in robes that concealed most of his form, was from a species so old that few remembered their original name. And he had been observing the inspection in silence from aboard the Eternal Discourse, his presence here on the planet's surface meant something significant. Elder. Counselor Zrendok's holographic form flickered to life nearby. You requested to address the tribunal directly. We are listening. Vormith's voice was like wind through dry leaves. Soft and rustling and somehow heavy with the weight of millennia. I have watched this inspection with great interest, he said, because it reminds me of a mistake my own people made long ago. The garden fell silent as everyone turned their attention to the ancient being. 12,000 years ago. My species believed as Inspector Kethvari believes now, Vormith continued. We thought that restricting the freedom of young was cruelty. We thought that children should learn only through play and exploration. We thought that forcing knowledge upon unwilling minds was a violation of their fundamental rights. And were you wrong? Kethvari asked, his tone skeptical. We were catastrophically wrong, Vormith replied. Within 3 generations, our civilization began to collapse. Children who were never taught discipline did not learn it on their own. Children who were never given structured knowledge did not seek it independently. Children who were never required to struggle did not develop the strength to face hardship. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. We lost our science because no one wanted to study it. We lost our history because no one wanted to memorize it. We lost our art because no one wanted to practice the difficult techniques. We thought we were giving our children freedom, but we were actually giving them emptiness. Ambassador Yun leaned forward, sensing an opportunity. What happened to your people, Elder? We nearly destroyed ourselves, Vormith said simply. It took us 4,000 years to rebuild what we had lost. 4,000 years of slowly relearning the value of structured education, of discipline, of requiring young ones to do difficult things they would not choose for themselves. Morales looked down at Jiwoo, who was listening with rapt attention, even though she probably understood only half of what was being said. You are saying that humans are right to imprison their children? Kethvari demanded. I am saying that not all confinement is imprisonment, Vormith replied. And not all freedom is kindness. Sometimes love requires us to restrict those we care for, to guide them through difficult passages, to insist that they learn things they would rather avoid. Dr. Park stepped forward, her eyes bright with vindication. This is what I have been trying to explain. Human children are not born ready. They are born with potential, raw and unformed. And that potential must be shaped through years of careful cultivation. But the children did not choose this shaping. Kethvari insisted. No, Dr. Park agreed. They did not, and that is precisely the point. She pulled up data on her tablet, projecting it for all to see. Human neurological development requires structured input during critical periods. Children who do not learn to read by age 8 often never become fully literate. Children who do not learn mathematics by age 12 struggle with logical reasoning throughout their lives. Children who do not learn to function within social structures become unable to cooperate with others as adults. We are not born knowing how to be human. Ambassador Yun added softly. We must be taught, and sometimes teaching requires things that feel uncomfortable in the moment. Jiwoo tugged on Morales' wing again. I think I understand now, the little girl said. You thought we were sad because we have to go to school, but we are not sad. We are just learning. And learning is hard sometimes, but it makes us better. Morales stared at the child with something approaching wonder. Out of the mouths of babes, Vormith murmured. The young human understands what the inspector does not. Kethvari's mandibles had finally stopped clicking for the first time since the inspection began. He looked uncertain. I need to think about this, he said slowly. I need to process what I have heard. Counselor Zrendok's holographic form pulsed with cautious hope. Then we shall reconvene tomorrow for a final hearing, and the children themselves shall be given a chance to speak. As the delegation prepared to leave the garden, Morales felt a small hand slip into her own jiwoo was looking up at her with a brilliant smile. "Will you come back tomorrow? I want to show you my art project. I drew a picture of space, but now I can add a purple bird alien to it." Morales found that she was looking forward to tomorrow more than she had looked forward to anything in a very long time. "Yes," she said gently, "I will come back." The alien delegation arrived at Hounday Elementary School on a bright morning. When the cherry blossoms were falling like pink snow across the playground, Principal Seo Youngie stood at the entrance with her hands clasped tightly together, watching as the shuttle descended from the clouds and settled onto the designated landing area. She had received very specific instructions from the government. Cooperate fully. Answer honestly, and for the sake of humanity's future, try not to make things worse. Inspector Kethvari emerged first, his insectoid body moving with rigid precision as his compound eyes scanned the school grounds. Morales followed close behind, her violet feathers catching the morning light, and several other alien observers trailed after them with recording devices and analytical instruments. "Welcome to our school," Principal Seo said, forcing a smile that felt brittle on her face. "We are honored to have you here." "We are not here for honor," Kethvari replied flatly. "We are here for truth, Ambassador." Yun stepped forward from where she had been waiting near the school entrance. "The children have been informed that we will have visitors today. They are curious about you, and we have encouraged them to interact naturally." "Naturally," Kethvari repeated, his mandibles clicking with skepticism. "We shall see what passes for natural among imprisoned youth." They entered the building, and immediately the alien delegation was engulfed in chaos. Children poured through the hallways between classes, their voices rising in a cacophony of shouts, laughter, and excited chatter. A group of boys raced past the aliens without a second glance, chasing after a ball that someone had dropped too. Girls stopped mid-conversation to stare at Morales with open-mouthed wonder. "Pretty bird lady," one of them whispered to the other, and both dissolved into giggles before running awake. Davari observed all of this with growing confusion. He had expected to find rows of silent, broken children shuffling through gray corridors with dead eyes and crushed spirits. Instead, he found noise and color and energy that bordered on overwhelming. "The prisoners seem unusually animated," he remarked to Morales. "I am sensing their emotions," Morales replied, her head tilting as she processed the empathic input. "It is very strange. I feel excitement, curiosity, happiness. And yes, there is boredom and frustration mixed in, but not despair, not trauma, not the resignation I expected." They were led to a classroom where a teacher named Im Chae-yoon was conducting a lesson on mathematics. 23 children sat at desks arranged in rows, their attention focused on the board where equations were being explained. "As you can see," Principal Seo whispered, "the children are engaged in learning. They are confined to chairs and forced to stare at symbols." Kethvari observed, "This is engagement?" A small hand shot up from the back of the room. "Teacher," called a boy with messy hair and a mischievous grin, "why do we have bugs and birds in our classroom?" The class erupted in laughter, and Teacher M struggled to restore order while fighting back her own smile. "That is Quan Taiwan," Principal ECO explained quietly. "He's one of our more spirited students." "Spirited," Kethvari repeated. "You mean disobedient. He struggles with sitting still, but he has a good heart." The lesson continued, and the aliens watched as children raised hands to answer questions, whispered to their neighbors when the teacher was not looking, doodled in their notebooks, and occasionally stared out the window at the playground beyond. When Taiwan spoke out of turn for the third time, Teacher M pointed to a chair in the corner of the room. 5 minutes, she said firmly. "Think about why we wait for our turn to speak." Taiwan slumped dramatically but walked to the corner and sat down, his arms crossed in theatrical protest. Morales felt her heart constrict with horror. "Isolation," she whispered. They use isolation as punishment. It is only 5 minutes, Ambassador Yoon said quickly. It is not harmful. It is just a moment to calm down and reflect. You separate a child from his peers as a consequence for speaking, Kathvari said, his voice heavy with disgust. Among my people, such treatment would be considered psychological torture. The classroom door opened, and a small girl peeked inside. She had pigtails tied with yellow ribbons and a curious expression that showed no fear whatsoever. "Excuse me," she said, looking directly at Morales. "Are you a real alien?" "Big Jiwoo, you should be in your own class," Teacher said gently, but Jiwoo had already walked across the room to stand in front of Morales. Her head tilted back to look up at the tall avian being. "Your feathers are so pretty," Jiwoo said with genuine admiration. "Can I touch them?" Morales found herself frozen, uncertain how to respond to this tiny human who approached a strange alien with nothing but curiosity and delight. "I suppose you may," Morales said finally. Jiwoo reached up and ran her small fingers along the edge of Morales' wing, her face breaking into a brilliant smile. "So soft," she breathed. "My friend Soin is not going to believe this." Kathvari watched the interaction with growing bewilderment. This child had no fear, no trauma, no visible signs of the psychological damage that prolonged confinement should cause. She was bright and curious and fearless in a way that seemed impossible for a prisoner. "Why are you here?" Jiwoo asked Morales, finally withdrawing her hand. "My teacher said you were visiting, but she did not say why. We are trying to understand why human children come to this place," Morales said carefully, Jiwoo's face scrunched in confusion. "Because we have to? Everyone goes to school. That is just how it is. But do you want to be here?" Jiwoo thought about this question with surprising seriousness for an 8-year-old. "Sometimes yes, and sometimes no," she admitted. "Math is boring, but I like art class, and my friends are here. And Teacher tells funny stories during reading time. But if you could choose to never come here again, would you?" Jiwoo's eyes went wide with something like alarm. "But then how would I learn to read?" "My mom says I need to read so I can understand the world. And I want to understand the world because there are aliens in it, and I did not even know that until today." Morales had no response to this strange logic from the corner. Taiwan called out, "Can I be done with my time out now?" "I want to meet the aliens too." Teacher sighed but nodded. And Taiwan bounded across the room to join the growing cluster of children who had abandoned their seats to crowd around the visitors. "Are you going to take over Earth?" Taiwan asked eagerly. "Because that would be really cool. I saw it in a movie once." "We are not here to take over anything," Kathvari said, slightly offended. "We are here to investigate the treatment of human children." "Investigate what?" Taiwan asked, his face scrunched in confusion. "We want to know if you are happy here." "Morales," said Taiwan, shrugged with the careless honesty of a 10-year-old. "School is kind of boring and I get in trouble a lot. But my friends are here, and we play football at lunch, and sometimes we have pizza day. So it is okay, I guess." Kathvari's mandibles clicked in frustration. None of this made sense. The children were confined against their will, subjected to rigid schedules and arbitrary punishments, separated from their families for most of their waking hours. And yet they spoke of their imprisonment with casual acceptance and even occasional fondness. Either they were so thoroughly indoctrinated that they could no longer recognize their own suffering, or the aliens had fundamentally misunderstood something about human society as the delegation prepared to leave. Jiwoo tugged on Morales' wing. "You look sad," the little girl observed. "Why do you look sad when you are visiting such a nice place?" Morales stared down at the small human and found that she had no answer. The child's emotions radiated warmth, curiosity, and genuine concern for the alien's well-being. There was no darkness there, no hidden trauma, no suppressed suffering. Just a little girl who had touched an alien's feathers and thought it was the best day of her life. Morales began to wonder if perhaps the galaxy had made a terrible mistake. The diplomatic chamber on orbital station Seijo had never been designed to hold this many observers. Holographic projections filled every corner of the room as representatives from dozens of species materialized to witness the emergency hearing counselor, Drendak, floated at the center of the chamber, his translucent body pulsing with soft blue light as he called the session to order. This tribunal has been convened to address serious allegations against the human species. His voice resonated through universal translators. Inspector Kethvari, please present your findings. Kethvari rose from his seat, his compound eyes sweeping across the assembled observers before settling on the small human delegation seated across the chamber. Ambassador Yun sat rigid and pale, flanked by Captain Dowan and several officials who looked equally stunned by the sudden turn of events. Counselors and distinguished observers, Kethvari began. During my inspection of human civilization, I discovered a practice so disturbing that I felt compelled to invoke emergency protocols. He activated a display screen that showed images captured from the school visit children sitting in rows. Children behind fences, children being directed by adults, children confined to small desks for hours at a time. The humans call these facilities schools, Kethvari continued. They claim these are places of learning and development. But what I witnessed was unmistakably a system of mass detention. He outlined his observations methodically. The mandatory attendance laws that force children to appear regardless of their wishes. The separation from family units for 6 to 8 hours daily. The rigid schedules that dictated when children could eat or speak or move. The punishments administered for those who failed to comply. These children have committed no crimes, Kethvari said. They've done nothing wrong, yet they are confined against their will from the age of 5 or 6 until they reach physical maturity. And this practice is not hidden or shameful among humans, but is instead celebrated and enforced by law. A murmur rippled through the holographic observers. The Veluxi ambassador nodded in grim agreement, while the Orenthi delegation huddled together with obvious distress. If I may respond, Ambassador Yin said. Rising from her seat, Counselor Drendak gestured for her to speak. What, Inspector? Kethvari describes as imprisonment is actually education, Ambassador Yin said carefully. Our children attend schools to learn essential skills and knowledge. This is not punishment, but preparation for adult life. Preparation that requires confinement? Asked Counselor Drendak, genuine confusion evident in his pulsing light patterns. Children learn better in structured environments with qualified instructors. Ambassador Yun explained. Our schools provide this structure. But do the children consent to this structure? Kethvari interrupted. Do they choose to attend these facilities? Ambassador Yun hesitated, and her hesitation spoke volumes. Children are not capable of making such decisions for themselves, she finally said. They do not understand what is best for their future. The chamber erupted in shocked whispers among most galactic civilizations. The idea that adults could override the autonomy of young beings so completely was deeply troubling. The Veluxi representative spoke next, her wings folding and unfolding with agitation. Among my people, our young receive all necessary knowledge through direct neural inheritance at birth. They emerge from their development pods fully equipped with the accumulated wisdom of their lineage, and no confinement is required. And among the Orenthi, Morales added, our young remain with the flock at all times, learning through observation and participation, never separated from their family bonds, never forced into isolation. The Drelmac young roam freely across our homeworld from the moment they can walk. Another counselor offered. They learn through exploration and play, and any attempt to confine them would be considered abuse of the highest order. Ambassador Yun looked increasingly desperate as species after species described child-rearing practices that involve freedom, autonomy, and continuous family connection. Our species is different, she insisted. Human children are born helpless and remain dependent for many years. They cannot survive without constant care and guidance. Then provide care and guidance. Kethvari said sharply, "Why must you cage them to do so?" The doors to the chamber opened, and Dr. Park Minji entered. She was a small woman with kind eyes and gray-streaked hair, and she had been summoned urgently from Earth's surface to provide expert testimony on human child development. "Counselors," she said, bowing slightly to the assembly, "I am a psychologist who has studied human children for over 40 years. May I offer some context?" Counselor Jurendak gestured for her to proceed. Dr. Park took a deep breath and began to explain, "Human children are not born with innate knowledge or survival skills. Unlike many of your species, our young arrive in the world knowing almost nothing. They cannot walk, they cannot feed themselves, they cannot communicate beyond basic cries." She pulled up comparative data on the display screen. A Veluxi emerges from its pod with complete neural inheritance. An Orinthi chick can run and communicate within hours of hatching. But a human infant requires years of development before achieving basic competency. This does not explain the confinement, Kethvari said. "I am getting there," Dr. Park replied patiently. "Because our children start with nothing, everything must be taught. Language, mathematics, science, history, social skills, critical thinking, all of it must be deliberately transmitted from one generation to the next. And this transmission requires imprisonment?" Counselor Zrendak asked. Dr. Park sighed, struggling to bridge the conceptual gap. "Not imprisonment, structure. Human brains develop through a process called neuroplasticity, which means they are shaped by their experiences and inputs during childhood. Without organized education, children would not develop the cognitive abilities needed to function in our civilization. You are saying that your young are defective," the Veluxi ambassador observed. "That they require repair through confinement?" "No. I am saying they are potential," Dr. Park corrected. "Raw potential that must be cultivated." The chamber fell silent as the assembled observers struggled to comprehend this alien concept. For species that emerged fully formed or learned through osmosis and observation, the idea of deliberately shaping young minds through years of structured confinement was almost incomprehensible. As Lee rose from her seat, her feathers rippling with distress, "I sensed the children's emotions during our visit," she said quietly. "They felt boredom, frustration, resentment, and resignation. These are not the emotions of beings who are being helped. These are the emotions of prisoners who have accepted their fate." Dr. Park nodded slowly, and Ambassador Yun noticed with alarm that the psychologist did not deny the observation. "Children do not always enjoy school," Dr. Park admitted. "Learning can be difficult and tedious, and yes, children often wish they could be elsewhere. Then why force them?" Counselor Zrendak asked, and for the first time, there was something like accusation in his voice. "Because the alternative is worse," Dr. Park said. "Without education, human children grow into adults who cannot read, cannot reason, cannot participate meaningfully in society. We do not imprison our children out of cruelty. We educate them because we love them and want them to thrive." The words hung in the air, but Kethvari remained unmoved. "Love that requires cages is not love," he said coldly. "It is control dressed in pleasant language." Counselor Zrendak's body pulsed with deep amber light, a sign of troubled deliberation. "This tribunal has heard disturbing testimony," he announced. "Until we can determine whether human educational practices constitute a violation of union principles regarding the treatment of young beings, humanity's membership candidacy is hereby suspended." Ambassador Young closed her eyes in defeat. Furthermore, Councillor Rendak continued, a delegation will be sent to the surface to conduct direct observation of these schools, and we will determine for ourselves whether the children of Earth are students or prisoners. As the holographic observers began to fade, Morales found herself studying the human delegation. Ambassador Yun looked devastated. Dr. Park looked exhausted. And Captain Dohan looked like he wanted to punch something. But what struck Morales most was the genuine confusion on their faces. They truly did not understand why the galaxy was horrified to them. Schools were normal, natural, and necessary to them. Locking children away for years was simply how things were done. And that, Morales realized, might be the most troubling thing of all. The massive diplomatic vessel called the Eternal Discourse hung in orbit above Earth, like a silver moon that had wandered too close to the planet inside the ship. Inspector Kethvari reviewed his notes for the 100th time, his compound eyes scanning the data screens with mechanical precision. He had inspected 47 species before their admission to the Galactic Union, and he had never failed to complete an assessment within the standard 10-cycle period. Humanity would be no different. You seem tense, said Sub-Inspector Morales from across the preparation chamber, her avian head tilting with curiosity as her empathic senses brushed against his emotional state. I am never tense, Kethvari replied, his mandibles clicking in mild irritation. I am thorough. And there is a difference that your species often fails to recognize. Morales ruffled her violet feathers but said nothing more, choosing instead to focus on the viewport where Earth rotated slowly beneath them. She had heard stories about humans. As had everyone in the Union, they were a young species, barely 300 years into space travel. Yet they had already established colonies on 12 worlds and negotiated trade agreements with half the known galaxies. Some called them ambitious, others called them reckless, and a few whispered that they were dangerous in ways that no one fully understood yet. The shuttle descended through Earth's atmosphere and docked at orbital station Sejong, where Ambassador Yun Seojin waited with a small delegation of human officials. Welcome to humanity's doorstep, Ambassador Yun said with a warm smile. Her dark hair pulled back in a neat arrangement the Morales found oddly pleasing. We are honored to host the Union's inspection team, and we hope to demonstrate that Earth is ready for full membership. Kethvari's response was a curt nod, his attention already wandering to the station's architecture and the humans. Moving through its corridors, everything seemed orderly enough, though he noticed that humans touched each other frequently. Hands on shoulders, brief embraces, gestures that would be considered intrusive among the Veluxi. Shall we begin with the tour? Captain Dawan asked, a tall man with a military bearing who commanded the station's security forces. Yes, Kethvari said. I wish to see everything, and I mean everything, without exception or concealment. Ambassador Yun's smile never wavered, though Morales sensed a flicker of something beneath it. Perhaps nervousness, or perhaps simply the weight of responsibility. Of course, Inspector, we have nothing to hide. The first 2 days of the inspection proceeded smooth. Kethvari examined human technology and found it adequate, if unspectacular. He reviewed their legal codes and discovered a complex but functional system of governance. He observed their medical facilities and noted that humans dedicated enormous resources to extending their brief lifespans. Everything was acceptable. Everything was within parameters, and everything suggested that humanity would pass the assessment without difficulty on the 3rd day. Kethvari made a routine request. I wish to observe your development facilities for young, he said during the morning briefing. Every species raises its offspring differently, and understanding this process is essential to evaluating cultural stability. Ambassador Yun nodded without hesitation. Of course, we can arrange a visit to one of our schools this afternoon. Schools? Morales asked, unfamiliar with the term. facilities where our children learn, Ambassador Yun explained. Reading, mathematics, science, history, the accumulated knowledge of our civilization. Kethvari made a note on his tablet, finding nothing unusual in the concept. As many species had formalized education systems of one kind or another, the shuttle took them down to Earth's surface, to a city called Bazan, where a building sat on a green hill surrounded by metal fencing. Ambassador Yun led them through the entrance, past security checkpoints and locked doors, into a wide corridor filled with noise and movement. Kethvari stopped walking. His compound eyes struggled to process what he was seeing. Hundreds of human children, small and fragile and unmistakably young, were confined within the building's walls. They sat in rows inside chambers with sealed doors, their movements restricted to designated areas, their activities dictated by electronic signals that rang at precise intervals. Adults stood at the front of each chamber, speaking in commanding tones while the children remained seated and silent. "What is this?" Kethvari asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "This is Hounday Elementary School," Ambassador Yun said proudly. "One of our finest educational institutions, serving children from ages 6 to 12. Morales felt her heart's racing as her empathic abilities flooded with input. She sensed boredom, restlessness, frustration, and resignation emanating from the small humans in waves that made her feathers stand on end. "These children," she said slowly, "they are here against their will." Ambassador Yun's expression shifted to confusion. "I am not sure I understand the question. Do they choose to be here?" Kethvari demanded, his mandibles clicking rapidly. "Do they choose to sit in these chambers, to follow these schedules, to obey these adults who are not their parents?" "Well, no," Ambassador Yun admitted. "Education is mandatory for all human children. It is the law." The word hit Kethvari like a physical blow. Mandatory, compulsory, forced. He watched as a small human attempted to leave her seat, only to be firmly directed back by the adult at the front of the room. He saw children staring out windows at the sunshine beyond the fence, their small faces pressed against the glass with obvious longing. He observed the locked doors, the regulated schedules, the punishments administered for non-compliance. "Inspector," Ambassador Yun asked, her voice uncertain now, "is something wrong?" Kethvari turned to face her, and for the first time in his 47 inspections, he felt genuine horror coursing through his thorax. "You imprison your children," he said flatly. "What?" "No, we do not imprison them. We educate them. You confine them to buildings against their will. You separate them from their family units for most of their waking hours. You force them to comply with rigid schedules and arbitrary rules. And you punish them when they resist." Kethvari's voice rose with each word. "What would you call this if not imprisonment?" Ambassador Yun opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. She looked at the school around her as if seeing it for the first time, and Morales sensed genuine bewilderment flooding through her emotional state. "Inspector, I think there has been a misunderstanding," Captain Dowan interjected, stepping forward with his hands raised in a calming gesture. "There is no misunderstanding," Kethvari said coldly. "I have seen enough." He activated his communication device and spoke rapidly in the Veluxi language, his mandibles clicking out an emergency code that had not been used in decades. Within seconds, a response came from the Eternal Discourse, and within minutes, holographic displays flickered to life throughout the school's main hall as Union Council members appeared from across the galaxy. Counselor Jrendok materialized first, his ancient jellyfish-like form pulsing with bioluminescent concern. "Inspector Kethvari, what is the nature of this emergency?" Kethvari straightened his thorax and spoke the words that would change humanity's future. "Counselor, I am formally accusing the human species of systematic mass imprisonment of their own young, and I am requesting an immediate suspension of their membership candidacy." pending a full investigation into what I can only describe as institutionalized cruelty on a planetary scale. The holographic counselors erupted into chaos. Their voices overlapping in a dozen languages. Ambassador Yun stood frozen in the middle of the school hallway, surrounded by the confused faces of human teachers and the curious eyes of human children who had no idea that their ordinary Tuesday had just become a galactic incident. Morales reached out with her empathic senses one more time, searching for some sign that she and Kethvari were wrong, that they had misread the situation somehow. But all she felt from the children was what she had felt before: boredom, restlessness, and the quiet resignation of beings who had accepted their confinement as normal. The aliens could not process it. They could not understand how any species could do this to their own young and call it love.